Now, speaking of the gender wars, you've heard many, many arguments put that women get ripped off by the superannuation system, that the system is favoured towards men who are all amassing all this wealth for their retirements. Of course, in reality, life's a bit different to that. And Bettina Arndt is one person who's always argued that men keep getting a raw deal in public debate. She says hard-working men, of course, are sacking away superannuation for their families, for wives and children. She joins us now. Good to talk to you, Bettina. It's a very common sense argument, because those people operating the real world know that this is how superannuation in families usually operates. But you've been digging around at some statistics and have come up with a graph from the Australian Tax Office that demonstrates the point very clearly.
Yes, I was most surprised to discover this graph, which shows that, yes, women have significantly less amounts of super right through to their mid-60s, and then things start to level out. That's what's really fascinating.
We're just showing the graph now, Bettina, if you can see, and it's women's superannuation in light blue, men in dark blue, and you can see as you get over the age of 60, it really starts to even out. Now, explain what's going on there.
Well, I think, unfortunately, Chris, you lot are dying off. It would appear that one of the major what's happening there is a lot of the men, a lot of the women are outliving the men. And, of course, women are the major beneficiaries of their partner's super. I mean, most of these high-income men are married with children, and the wives are the ones who get the super from their husbands when the husbands die. Women, on average, live 5 years older than men, tend to marry men a bit older. So we have a significant period where we can live off the men's super. And no one ever talks about that. And here it was in this graph. ATO mentions not a word about it. And we hear this constant dialogue about, privileged men ripping off women.
Yeah, and of course the reality is we all know that. The reason we have superannuation, either the compulsory superannuation or other elements of it, is for people to provide for families. Now, of course, it should go without saying, but I have to say we all support all choices that family men and women, mothers and fathers make about their working lives. But it is quite common for women to either work part-time or to take years off of work raising children, so their super contribution is lower compared to perhaps the husband. But of course, the husband's super, it's there for the family. That's the idea of it. It's not for him alone.
I know. And of course, this is the big difference in the whole endless discussion about the wage gap. And one of the things that's rarely talked about there is the fact that men work so many longer hours, so much more long hours than women do, not only at any one time, but throughout their lives. I mean, women on average, 45% of women at any one time are working part-time, and then 20% of women have retired, 25% of women have retired by 45 compared to 7% of the men. So women are giving up full-time work much sooner than men do. Most men work full-time most of their lives, often in crummy jobs. They get stuck in jobs for decades, which aren't much fun, but they're doing it for their families. And this is what drives me crazy, this assumption that, these fat cats are living the high life, when in fact most men are doing it for their families. The families are the beneficiaries. There's really good evidence showing now that women actually make most of the decisions about spending the family income now. And so it's not just when men die. They have the benefit of this higher income all through their marital and partnered relationships.
Yeah, it seems to me a classic case of where people sort of use the statistics they like to prosecute their gender wars. Really what you're talking about is family superannuation, and often there's a male-female imbalance there as to who's contributed to most to it, but they all benefit from it. These are the daily decisions about income and work-life balance that all families make.
Absolutely, and most people do see it as a unit where we're both putting in effort for our mutual benefit. I've always been amused at the anger that comes out when the researchers look at, for instance, work in the family and how that divides up, and they find many people in good relations, many women believe they're getting a fair deal, even though they're doing most of the housework, for instance, because they know the men are putting in those longer hours. And it gives them the opportunity to structure their working lives around their families, which is what most Australian women still want. They want to work part-time when they have young children, and they choose to do that, and they can only do that because the men are putting in the much longer hours.
Thanks for injecting some common sense to the debate again, Bettina. I appreciate it.
Very good. Chris, it's all on my website if people want to read it.
Indeed, to Google Bettina Arndt's website and have a look at these articles and some of the statistics. We all know it makes sense, right? If there's a marriage, a man and a woman, they don't quibble about who's got the most super. One might have more than the other, but it's a nest egg for all of them. That's the idea. We all know there's single parent families and all the rest of it, but in the ideal world, we would share our super. And Bettina Arndt really drawing our attention to that reality.